gestured to the TV with an air of judgment. Why are you still watching this stuff? It's just going to keep stressing you out, and that's not good for you or the baby. Natalie bristled. I want to know if Bob's been arrested yet, obviously. I want to be able to feel safe in my own home again. If Bob Marner had been taken into custody, I'm sure we would have heard about it by now. Watching these press conferences is only going to rile you up. James took the remote from the side table and switched the broadcast off. Natalie snapped at him. Hey, excuse you. James repeated himself pedantically. It's not good for you. It's not good for Rebecca. She's home safe now. Everything is fine. Put on Peppa Pig or something. They walked out of the den, leaving the TV switched off. Natalie glared after him. When she heard the door to his office close, she surreptitiously switched the TV back on and continued watching the press conference. That night, after reading Rebecca a bedtime story and tucking her snugly into her crib, Natalie crawled into bed beside James, who had his reading glasses on and was flipping through a book by the light of his bedside lamp. He adjusted his position to make room for her, but didn't look away from the book. Natalie stared at him. Finally, he felt her eyes on him and put the book down on his chest. He sighed with frustration. Yes, dear? Natalie couldn't quite tell if he was in one of his moods or not, but she knew she needed to talk to him. She proceeded with caution. I don't want you to think I'm being paranoid again, but something about that chief of police just isn't sitting right with me. James removed his glasses. What do you mean? Natalie felt relieved by his seemingly earnest curiosity. Well, for starters, I don't like that he's going around saying that they have a few different leads. What leads is he talking about? You found Rebecca on Bob Marner's property. I can't imagine anything more incriminating than that. James nodded, listening supportively. I just don't understand why Bob hasn't been brought in for questioning yet. If you found Rebecca on anyone else's property, they'd have been arrested immediately. What's stopping Chief Rutler from going after Bob? James considered this. Bob has a lot of sway. You know this, honey. That's what makes him such a dangerous enemy to have. Maybe he's been paying Rutler under the table or something, hush money, to keep him quiet. Natalie's eyes widened. You think he's a dirty cop? James tried to take a neutral stance. I'm not saying that. Then he relented. But it is possible. It's hard to know who we can trust these days. It feels like the Marners have got a hand in every shady operation around town lately. Natalie considered this. I think I need to look into his history. I want to know how many cases of his are still cold and what ties he might have to the Marner family. James put an arm around her and pulled her closer to him. I love that you want to protect our family and make sure Bob faces the music. But I worry about you getting too involved with dangerous people. Just please be careful, okay? She snuggled into the nook of his arm. I will. I learned from the best. Feeling that James was in her corner again, Natalie finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Natalie felt a wave of relief and comfort at waking up in her own home, knowing that her family was safe, at least for now. Natalie bustled about the kitchen, cooking breakfast for herself and James, while James fed Rebecca from her baby bottle. She really felt that she was part of the family she always wanted to have.
You good, sir?
She smiled to herself.
You okay?
Maybe some people really
Do you need a
can
jacket
handle.
or you good?
She laid 2 placemats and plates down on the dining room table and served a generous portion of scrambled eggs, fried potatoes, and fresh fruit.
You drinking water?
He gazed
Well,
at her with
why
admiration.
is your camera
I
on?
love it when you make breakfast. You make the best scrambled eggs in the world, even better than your mother's. Don't tell her I said that. Natalie laughed. I would never. She served a plate for herself, along with hot coffee and fresh squeezed orange juice, and sat down opposite her handsome husband and beautiful baby girl. She picked up a fork, but before she could take her first bite, James eyed the phone in the hallway. Who could be calling us this early and on the landline? Natalie raised an eyebrow. That's a great question. I guess I'll go find out. Natalie excused herself from the table and picked up the ringing receiver. When she heard the voice on the other end of the line, her smile dissolved. Is this Natalie Young? Speaking. Good morning, this is Chief Rutler from the LAPD. Natalie felt tension tightening her throat. I know who you are. I'm glad to hear it, Chief Rottler replied, with an air of self-importance that Natalie found quite repulsive. I'm calling you this morning because I wanted to let you know that we will, in fact, be investigating Bob Marner for any potential ties to the kidnapping of your daughter.
Jay, stop. You see, I told you not touching the window.
Ties? My husband found her in the Marner's pool house. I think we can do a little better than potential ties. Chief Rottler puffed up with an air of condescending authority. My apologies. I didn't realize you were a detective, too. Natalie gritted her teeth. We have to follow the order of the law until we have concrete evidence. Natalie cut him off. She was fuming now. What evidence is more concrete than finding our daughter on his property? Plus, I know that you know that Bob hacked into my business account in an attempt to fraudulently slander my company and sent a hitman into our home in the middle of the night to kill my husband. Who else has more to gain from coming after our daughter and bankrupting our family? The chief of police was silent for a moment. Then he responded in a dismissive tone. Yes, well, he cleared his throat. We'll be sure to look into that. Natalie stood her ground. Please see that you do. She hung up the phone in a huff and returned to the dining table. She looked at her warm plate of food, but suddenly felt she'd lost her appetite and pushed it away. James cocked his head. What's going on? Bob stewed. The same old shit. Something is definitely up with that police chief. He said that Bob may be implicated in the kidnapping. I wish he would just do his job and arrest him already. Or does he not care at all about our safety and security? James shrugged uncomfortably. If he really is under Bob's thumb, then maybe his own security and safety is on the line if he gives too much away. Natalie considered this. You're right. She stood up from the table and spoke with determination. Good thing I have a plan.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Mary?
So I know it's tempting to pour the used cooking oil straight down the sink, but I spoke to the local council and they said the best way to get rid of oil or fat is to collect it, once it's cooled down of course, in a used container, and then you can scoop it out and put it in the bin.
Cooking oils and fats block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
I'm going to talk to Tina Marchino at the LA Times. James looked at Natalie with confusion. What for? The LA Times has one of the best investigative journalism teams in the country. I'm going to ask her to have her team look into Chief Rottler's history on the force and any possible connections he might have to Bob Marner. James's vexed expression transformed into a smile. He stood and kissed Natalie on both cheeks. That's my girl. Always thinking outside the box. Go get him, Tiger. Natalie pulled up outside the offices about and walked up to the front steps, wearing sunglasses and a fashionable headscarf so as not to attract too much attention. The cover issue that boldly featured a fashionable image of Natalie, still pregnant with Rebecca, was being displayed as a massive billboard overhead. She pulled her headscarf down a bit to make sure no one was watching her and entered the massive headquarters. Tina? Natalie Young is here to see you. Natalie peeked over the assistant's shoulder into Tina's gorgeous, sun-drenched corner office, overlooking the Hollywood sign and all of Los Angeles. Tina was sitting behind her desktop computer, talking into a phone in one hand, writing notes with the other, and using her pencil to gesture to various
Then they did not even bring the food.
that a gathering of assistants were holding up. Natalie gulped. I should have called first. Tina is obviously extremely busy. I hate to disturb her unannounced. But when Tina caught sight of Natalie, her face lit up and she dismissed her assistants with a wave of her hand. Everyone give me 10. Go on, shoo. We have a special guest in the house. She hung up the phone and walked over to Natalie, wrapping her in a hug. Natalie, darling, how lovely to see you. Come in. Come in. She ushered Natalie over to her desk and sat her down in a plush armchair. I have to say, your cover issue has been selling like hotcakes. Everyone loves a woman who can do it all. Mother, wife, and a business mogul to boot. Natalie blushed. I'm glad you're not regretting your decision to put me on the magazine's cover. Tina scoffed. Are you kidding? I'd feature you again if I could. Then Tina's expression grew more serious. I'm so sorry to hear about Rebecca being taken from you so soon after her birth. Thank God you got her back in one piece. How is she doing now? Natalie swallowed hard. This was her opportunity to breach the uncomfortable subject matter she'd come here to discuss. Rebecca is doing fine. Thanks for asking. But actually, she's a part of the reason I've come here today. Tina cocked her head. Oh? Natalie took a deep breath. I know that Bob Miner was responsible for her kidnapping, but the chief of police, Chief Butler, is covering up for him for some reason. There's something fishy going on, and I don't trust it. I know it's a lot to ask, but would you be willing to have your team run an investigation on Chief